The call of nature costs a young journalist his life when he goes to wash his hands in a Sri Lankan lagoon. Lurking in the stillness of the lake, a crocodile lies in wait as Paul Mclean crouches down to dip his hands in the water. The crocodile launches itself upwards and grabs the unsuspecting Brit by his leg. Hit like and subscribe. This is fierce. 24-year-old Paul Mclean was taking a vacation from his high-flying career. The intelligent, witty, and charismatic young man had graduated from Oxford University and had landed an incredible job as a journalist for the Financial Times. He had worked for them for the past 2 years, spending months in Belgium as a correspondent, where he put his first-class French degree to good use. Working for the Financial Times was his first job since graduating. Before that, he spent a year in France teaching English and translating for local police officers as the only Briton in that part of the rural Ardennes. Despite being an exceptional linguist, Paul had developed a flair as a journalist. His eagerness to report in-depth, often hidden stories made him stand out from the crowd. He produced an eye-opening piece that stunned even the most senior of journalists on the 759 treaties the UK would need to establish post-Brexit. His talented writing for original, insightful, and deeply researched journalism was admired by his colleagues. But when Paul decided to take a holiday with his friends in Sri Lanka, disaster struck. He and his friends were staying at the East Beach Surf Resort in the southeast of Sri Lanka when they headed to Elephant Rock in Aragon Bay. Situated about 220 miles east of the capital Colombo, the bay was well known as a tourist hotspot for learning to surf. The gentle waves that glided into the beach were perfect for beginners. The golden sands and incredible sunsets were a sight to behold. Paul walked into Safa Surf School, where the owner, Fawaz Lafir, was only too happy to assist. Pulling on wetsuits, the friends paddled into the sea and learned how to catch the waves, balance on their boards, and stand up while being propelled forward by the sea. It was an incredible experience, and Paul was having a great time. But the call of nature halted his surfing momentarily. He was told by the locals that there were no facilities nearby, so Paul headed for some cover. As the beach that lines the bay curves around, there's a lagoon on the other side of the sand, so that the beach forms a narrow spit of land between the lagoon and the sea. Paul walked along this and looked out over the muddy lagoon. Lining it on the far side were some trees and bushes. Paul made his way around the edge of the water, walking about 800 meters away from the beach. He needed some privacy, but little did he know he was being watched. Under the lagoon surface lay a large crocodile. It was hidden by the murkiness of the water. Resting on the muddy bottom, its teeth were visible along the sides of its closed mouth. The vibrations from Paul's footsteps were detected by the giant reptile, and it rose upwards to investigate. It watched its potential prey silently and stealthily, its eyes fixed on the prize. It didn't move a muscle, but instead waited patiently for the opportune moment to strike. Paul found a suitable bush. With his back turned to the water, the crocodile slowly swam closer, only its eyes and nostrils protruding out of the water. Then, when it was within feet of the bank, it sank to the bottom of the lagoon. It was hidden in the shallows, its dark green-gray skin camouflaged in its environment. When Paul had finished, he walked over to the edge of the lagoon. Locals knew not to go near water like this. There was a hidden danger that had claimed lives before, but to non-native tourists, the water looked harmless. It was perfectly still, with its glassy surface reflecting the sky. Paul could hear the rush of the gentle waves beyond the other side of the lagoon. His friends were still in the water, being knocked off their boards repeatedly as they learned to surf. He would be back to them shortly, but first he crouched down by the edge of the lagoon to wash his hands. Paul hardly had time to react as an enormous crocodile launched itself out of the water. In that split second, all Paul could do was jump backwards. But the crocodile, an expert ambush predator, had accounted for this, and it snapped its jaws shut, catching Paul's right leg. In an instant, the crocodile pulled Paul off his feet and dragged him into the water. The young man let out a yell and waved his arms furiously above the surface of the water for a second before being taken below. Some people walking along the beach admiring the peaceful lagoon saw the attack. They were shocked as they witnessed Paul waving desperately for a few short seconds before disappearing. A local fisherman sitting in his boat in the lagoon also saw the terrifying incident unfold. Under the water, Paul was fighting for his life. He was a fit young man who was a keen squash player and football fan, but the crocodile was powerful and relentless. Paul would likely have reached down trying to pry open the jaws, but he was dragged further into the lagoon. He probably tried punching the crocodile and gouging its eyes, but it was impossible to inflict enough damage underwater. And tragically, within minutes, he was gone. When word got out that someone had been dragged into the lagoon, Paul's friends raced to the water. They looked out over the lagoon, calling Paul's name, hoping upon hope that there had been some kind of mistake. The police were called immediately, and while Paul's friends sat on the sand in total shock, the Army and Navy turned up. There was little they could do due to the murky water in the lagoon. They motored up and down, searching the banks for any sign of Paul. Navy divers then entered the water. Knowing that there was potentially a man-eating crocodile in the water called for nerves of steel. For locals, although there had never been an incident at that specific lagoon, they were aware that the nearby rivers were teeming with crocodiles. They knew not to enter the water and to stay away from the edges. Those who knew about crocodile attacks in the area predicted that Paul's body would show up in a day or two. With no sign of a body, speculation grew. Others were skeptical about whether it was a crocodile or not. There were reports of quicksand in the lagoon and suggestions that Paul may have become trapped in the sand, but this was later dismissed. There are two types of crocodile that live in Sri Lanka: the marsh or mugger crocodile that lives in freshwater environments, and the estuarine or saltwater crocodile that can tolerate both rivers and the open sea. This was the first time a crocodile had attacked a human at Elephant Rock. Until then, it had always been considered a safe place for tourists. The bay was sheltered from any bad weather or strong currents, and the lagoon added to the picture-perfect scenery. The following day, as Navy divers took to the water once more, they came across Paul's body. He was submerged in some mud very close to where he had been taken. There were 6 tooth marks on his right leg where the crocodile had grabbed him. His body was taken to be examined by a medical team. Upon the postmortem investigation, it was determined that he had died from drowning. It was a horrible and shocking end to a young man's life. He had made a fatal error in washing his hands in the lagoon that day. As the news of his death spread, tributes poured in from his family and friends, fellow students, and his colleagues. It was clear that he would be sorely missed by so many people, and that he was a bright spark who was destined for great things.